This is the Vanguard podcast. I'm Gavin.
I'm Zach.
And we've just been joined by Maebe A, Silver Lake neighborhood city councilwoman and speaker at the recent People's Party convention. How's it going, Maebe?
Hey, fantastic. How are you guys? Thank you so much for having me.
We're great.
We're doing great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We were so inspired and impressed by your speech at the recent People's Party convention. Of course, you were speaking alongside, the likes of Marianne Williamson and Dr. Cornel West and Nina Turner, as along with a whole range of other working people and lesser known quantities in the, leftist movement. Do you want to just let us know a little bit about how you got involved with MPP and what it was like, being a part of that really epic convention that for me at least was, one of the most optimistic kind of moments that I felt in a long time as far as the leftist movement goes?
Totally. Yeah. So first of all, it was such an honor to be asked to speak at the People's Convention. I was well aware of the People's Convention and I was excited to attend. And then about a week before, I got a message from Ryan Knight being like, do you want to speak at the convention? And I was just so blown away. I was like, yes, absolutely. I responded in 10 seconds. It was just it was such an honor to be able to speak, amongst some of the, most progressive leaders right now. So the way that I got involved with the People's Party, it was actually through my connection with Our Revolution Los Angeles. So when I was running for Congress here in LA, I was endorsed by Our Revolution LA, and Our Revolution Los Angeles, specifically that branch, was involved with forming the movement for a People's Party. So I was sort of made aware of it kind of early on. I attended my first organizing meeting back in May. And so I've been, just kind of following along and knew about the convention, obviously was a little, worn out from watching the DNC and the RNC. So, it was going to be just a delight just to watch, but to be able to participate was really cool. So I was really honored to be able to speak, and I'm just glad that I got to get a little bit of trans representation out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, you, speaking of running for Congress, you ran in this most recent time, correct? And came within about a point of victory. That's accurate?
Correct. Yes. So I ran for I was in the primary election for the 2020 cycle. So we started campaigning summer 2019, and we led a grassroots campaign. It was a pretty small campaign to begin with. We started off with a few volunteers and grew as the campaign carried on. And I think what made our campaign so successful was just the fact that we had a simple message that we want to help everybody. And, we believe in really fantastic ideas like Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, abolishing ICE, and trying to help unhoused people. And, I was really proud of how far our campaign made it just for the sheer fact that we were a brand new, campaign. This was our first time running for Congress. Granted, I had already won my local position, but I was really only known within my immediate community. And when you're running for Congress, you're running, to represent a much larger area than just your neighborhood. And so again, it was really, quite an honor just to run. And, when we started, we didn't know how we were going to do. My worst fear was that we would end up, coming in last place. There were 8 people that ran in our particular race. And, our goal was to get second place to advance to the general election. And again, we lost by only 1,114 votes. And, that was less than 1%. So the fact that we were able to do that with, very little financial resources up against an establishment figure from the Republican Party who ultimately got second place. And then, of course, the incumbent, Adam Schiff, who is incredibly well known right now. He's very popular because of his role in the Mueller report and, of course, the impeachment this year. So, of
course, he also voted for the Iraq War.
Of course, we could go on and on about all of the, injustices of his voting record.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, just for some perspective, what's it like making the jump from, a city council position to, running and trying to helm this whole congressional campaign without any, direct, major party involvement, without a lot of financial backing, if any. What's that like, kind of trying to helm all of that and grow? And obviously, there's got to be a lot that goes on.
Totally. It was, it was definitely a learning experience. And, the reason that I decided to run was, I was so excited with how well we did in my local election here. And, when I decided to run for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council, again, I didn't know if anybody would vote for me, but I went out and I talked to my neighbors, talked to them about, what's important to you, what do you want to see in a local official, and, just really made that connection with people. And, I was so happy to see how many progressive thinkers there are in my immediate area. And it just made me think, in, a larger sense, LA is such a progressive city, but our representation in government it's mostly moderate Democrats. And it just doesn't make sense to me that a place as progressive as LA should have moderate representation. So it was definitely scary, the idea of, because it is a leap to go from, neighborhood council to congressperson. And I did initially think about, trying to first, kind of work my way up through, more local city government. But when it came down to it, you shouldn't have to have these extreme qualifications to be a representative of our government. In fact, I don't think that we should have so many career politicians in Congress right now, because I think it really puts them out of touch with the people and what it's like to be a normal person like you and me, just, moving through life, dealing with everyday struggles that I think are often, again, out of touch for people that are in higher office for, decades and decades.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're correct that, despite it being such a progressive area, Los Angeles, like so many other progressive cities, is kind of run by a lot of, established moderate Democrats that are, bathed in corruption and don't really aren't on the same page as a lot of the voters. And that leads to, giving the opposite side, the GOP and the Republicans, the conservatives, it gives them the good talking point in that, well, look at all these cities that are run by Democrats, look at all these issues they have. Look at the homelessness crisis. Look at this, all these issues that aren't being addressed. And that's what happens when you elect Democrats. And for me, that's one of the biggest reasons why, a movement like the MPP is so important. Because, even if it's not successful, to at least emphasize the fact that not all of the leftists are, there is a standing up to this corruption. There is, a movement to say no to these ideals, which have, wrecked a lot of cities. And obviously not to give into like the fear mongering of the GOP, but there is definitely a lot of crises unfolding in the cities that need to be addressed. Inequalities, gentrification, all of these issues. Are you able to affect any change, or what? Like, how have you been able to, help in the role that you have been elected to as a neighborhood councilwoman?
It's really interesting that you bring that up, because it is such an interesting dynamic that I think that Democrats and Republicans sort of throw at each other, because we are working right now with a binary political system. It's very easy to break it down to this or that, black and white, us and them. And when the fact of the matter is that if you look at either the left or the right, there is not going to be a homogenous, group of people that is all, we all vote this way, we all think this way. But that's sort of what the system has broken it down to. So, I feel like there's this disdain for the other party. And I know that a lot of Democrats are really unhappy with Republicans. And while I agree that there's probably a lot of awful Republicans who are, Trump supporters and who don't give a shit about my civil rights or yours, I guarantee you there's also probably a lot of middle of the road Republicans who aren't out to get people like you or me, but maybe have a, more fiscal way of thinking, a more, fiscally conservative way of thinking. So anyways, so I think it's really easy to throw punches at the other side in terms of generalizations. And when it comes to Trump criticizing, democratically run cities, it's easy to do because most of the major cities are, Democratic. That's just the nature of, Democrats seem to flock to cities, and it's often a lot of, oppressed people and queer people and, artists and weirdos. And so again, it's really easy to throw punches across the border. But when it comes down to it, a lot of the leadership of those cities. The people themselves that live in those cities might be, very progressive thinking, but a lot of the leaders are, again, middle of the road. So they're much like their Republican counterparts. So there really is little difference, in my opinion, between, Republican Democratic leadership.
Yeah.
The point that I made at the People's Convention is that when it comes to, say big business and, corporate America, they really don't care if Republicans or Democrats are elected, because they know that the leadership on both of those sides are loyal to their donors, and their donors are, people from those industries, from big banks, from real estate, from health insurance companies, from fossil fuels, from weapons makers. And so that's why a movement for a People's Party should scare those people, because that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to remove that corporate influence and trying to, again, make it a party of the people rather than corporations.
Yeah, I think it was also another People's Party convention speaker, Chris Hedges, who once said that the people don't have a party in this country that they can vote for that's not voting for Goldman and Sachs.
Exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the struggles that were going on in Los Angeles, and I was out in LA about a week and a half ago, and it was my first time in LA proper ever, and the first thing that struck me was just the absolutely devastating homelessness crisis that's right there, and it's juxtaposed completely next to this like tremendous opulence. You're walking down Venice Beach and you're seeing homeless tents line after line, right as you look at somebody driving in a Ferrari. I wondered if you could talk about the extreme wealth gap that's presented itself in Los Angeles, driving up the housing cost, making the homelessness crisis even worse. And then on top of that, we're living through a pandemic-driven crisis, so there's an eviction crisis looming. I just wondered if you could talk about and provide some insight into how that's presenting itself in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all interconnected. The wealth disparity here, the juxtaposition of rich and poor is so extreme. You'll see these massive mansions in the hills, and then down at the bottom of the hills, you'll see these encampments. And LA is one of the most expensive cities to live in the entire nation. California is one of the most expensive states to live in. Yet I believe that one of the reasons that we attract a lot of unhoused, a lot of people that eventually become unhoused. First of all, I've always thought that being from Chicago, if I was ever in a situation where I was unhoused, I would want to make my way to nice weather.
As somebody who survived a Chicago winter, I concur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would not, be hanging out. So first of all, I do think that the weather, attracts people, and you get here and it's a hard city. It's a really hard city to make it in. And, you have to make a lot of money to just survive and just be able to make rent here. Ultimately we have this massive homelessness crisis. And here's what's really interesting, in my opinion, is, everybody is concerned with the homelessness crisis, but not everybody is concerned with wanting to help unhoused people. There's a lot of people that are concerned with what they consider to be, an eyesore in their community. So on a personal level,
disgusting.
Something that exactly. And that's something that I really experience, working on the neighborhood council, is that there's a lot of people who are concerned with homelessness, but not in the way that they should be. It's more so because they want to, they're more NIMBY people, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
So anyways, the homelessness crisis has been getting worse and worse here in Los Angeles over the years. Both this year and last year, the homelessness counts showed a double-digit increase in percentage in the number of unhoused people, not just in the city, but in the county. So every year in January, the LA Housing Services Authority, they do an annual homelessness count. It's like a census. And I actually participated in the census this year. And, it's a point and place census, and everyone has a different geographical district. And you go in and you're basically supposed to record any unhoused or potentially unhoused people that you see. But that's the trick. And that's why I guarantee you that it's severely underreported, because you don't always see homelessness. You're used to seeing, people in encampments, and that's very clear homelessness. But what you don't always see is people who are living in their cars, or people who are couch surfing, or just somebody who might not just be sitting on the sidewalk right there. So it's vastly underreported, but each year for the past few years, there's been a double-digit increase. So this year, I think it was about a 12 to 14% increase between both the city and the county. And this was before COVID even was a thing. So again, the census was conducted in January. We're not going to be facing the mass evictions for, COVID, that are COVID related until probably 2021, in which it's going to get even worse. So on any given night right now, there's about 40,000 unhoused people in the city of LA, about 60,000 in LA County. And again, this is before, people have been starting to get kicked out due to not being able to pay rent because of COVID. So, now's really the time that our local officials have to be taking action. And it's just really pathetic because they're not doing it on any level of government locally. They're not doing it on the city level or on the state level or on the federal level. Everyone's passing the buck. City's saying, I can't do it. We've got to, the state has to do something. The state's saying the federal has to do something. Federal's pushing it back to city's got to. So it's just this endless cycle of everyone pointing fingers at each other saying, you got to do this, you got to do this, and nothing is getting done. There's more action happening through local organizations than through city intervention. There's a lot of great organizations out here. Some of my favorites are K-Town for All, SELA, and Ground Game LA. They're all doing things to actively work with our unhoused neighbors on a daily basis through outreach, providing resources, and providing options that the city isn't offering. So yeah, I really don't know what it's going to take to, knock it into our local officials' heads that they have to do something about it, because it's a buzz topic right now. Everyone's talking about it, but nobody is doing anything about it.
It seems like it's... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry. I could go on and on about this.
Oh, I was just going to say, it seems like it's such a massive, pervasive problem, and it's presenting itself in cities all across the country, not just at Los Angeles, but New York City is facing a tremendous eviction crisis. This was a month or two ago, so this would have been June or July, but I want to say it had been 30% of New York renters hadn't been able to pay their rent between the months of March and July. So a terrible eviction crisis looming there, as well as places like, Kansas City and where we're located. One of the other things I wanted to ask you, and you've mentioned the intersectionality of a lot of these issues throughout our conversation, and as well as you brought them up in your campaign. And I wanted to ask you specifically about LGBTQIA issues as it relates to homelessness, because after, gay marriage legislation was, passed, and the Supreme Court mandated that, gay people are basically allowed to get married. The push for LGBTQ in queer community issues from the Democratic Party seemed to fall off, because it seems like a lot of those issues now require things like Medicare for all, help with homelessness, mental health treatment, things like that. I just wondered if you could talk about the intersection and how they relate in that capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. You make such a great point that, after gay marriage became a thing, everyone sort of thought, okay, cool, we're all equal now. But that's absolutely not the case. There are still so many injustices that queer people, gay people, trans people face on a daily basis. There's a lack of protections, and there's a hatred for our community. I hate to say it, but there is still a hatred for our community by certain people in our society. Yet there are very few protections for people like me who might, suffer a hate crime, and, they just treat it as, just another, domestic incident, or, they try to play it off as not being as big of a deal as it is. You can still be fired for being queer, in certain states. And, so basically when it comes to housing, I think that first of all, we see a lot of queer people who are unhoused. And that, I think, is, again, it stems from a general unacceptance in many times of queer people in our general society. But also you see a lot of families kicking out queer people, kicking out, teenagers. If you look at the national statistics for unhoused youth, 40% of unhoused youth nationwide are LGBTQIA, which is such a ridiculous statistic, because I can tell you that overall 40% of youth in the nation are not LGBTQIA, but you see this massive representation in the unhoused community with them. And unfortunately, it's because a lot of, conservative families will disown their queer children, which I think is, I just can't even fathom that, but that's the reality that so many queer people face. So there needs to be, more of a blanket protection for people like this, on a society, disowned by their families. Also, trans women in general have a harder time finding employment. If you have the luxury of reaching adulthood as a trans woman, it can be difficult to find employment. And so, again, these are, just a few of the reasons why we need to have, rules and laws in place to provide justice for queer people. But again, it's all very intersectional. It's all, if you look at a lot of the injustices in our society, you'll see that they're related and connected to, groups that are already marginalized, groups that are already oppressed, groups that are already, underprotected under the law.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I was also wondering if you were planning on running again for Congress, and if you'd consider running as a People's Party candidate, because I think I'm really looking forward to seeing who they end up recruiting to run, and I think for the issues that we're discussing, the visibility of trans people and representation in Congress, I think it would be awesome to run a candidate like yourself, to really forefront these issues and to make. I think you've presented such a good case for the issues you've talked about. The advocacy for the basic issues that most progressives represent, and I think it would be just so important to have some trans representation in the Congress or in any real position of government in Washington. Like you said, there is a serious hatred and misunderstanding out there among a lot of this country of trans people, and I just think it would be so important, representation wise to
absolutely
get into Congress. Are you planning on running again?
So, yes, I am planning on running again.
Nice.
I kind of think, how could we not, with how close we came this past time?
I know that must have been such a rough blow. It
truly was. It was really interesting. Like to lose by this much. No. It was both so exciting and so like, I can't believe it was just that. Obviously, I had the thoughts in my mind, if I had only knocked on 10 more doors or made a few more phone calls, but, you ultimately can't think about it that way.
Right. But sure. As a first-time candidate, it's tremendously impressive to get the turnout you did, especially in light of the pandemic.
Totally. We made a huge, huge dent in this election. And what I will say is that even though we didn't advance, I can say with certainty that we at least moved the agenda of my opponent, Adam Schiff, to the left. I've seen his positions on certain things just start to shift to the left. In fact, I even saw him vote against a military bill for once, which is something that I had never seen him do. Nice. But I know how much our campaign criticized him for consistently voting for military increases.
Yeah, I know he initially sponsored the Saudi war in Yemen, which was essentially committing a genocide against the people of Yemen, and it had to be brought through a bipartisan piece of legislation to get him to vote against this criminal act of war. I appreciate the work that you've done to push him to the left, because it is important even on the margins.
So I'm at least happy that we were able to do that, but it really it showed me and it showed my campaign team and our supporters that, wow, we can really do this. We just have to get a little tiny more support, start a little bit earlier, put in a little bit of extra effort, and we're going to be able to advance to the general election. And, as I mentioned, queer and trans representation is so important, especially because if you look at the history of Congress, first of all, there's only about 10 openly queer people in Congress right now. Never in the entire history has there ever been a trans or non-binary person in our Congress, or at least openly trans or non-binary. And just imagine the great things that we could do if we had people, of that group working for people like that. And I just can't believe in fairness and honesty that our government as it is could possibly understand the struggles that, trans people endure without being a trans or non-binary person. You know what I mean? So not that I don't think that there are certainly people in Congress who care about my well-being or the well-being of people like me. but it's different to experience that, firsthand and be able to, speak through experience rather than through simply empathy. So, so we are planning on running again. We haven't made an official announcement. This also is not an official announcement, but we are very likely running again. We're probably going to be announcing in early 2021.
Nice.
And what's actually really interesting is, so we were initially planning on 22. So a chance that there could be a special election in my district, because if Biden-Harris wins the election, first of all, there's going to be a vacancy in the Senate seat in California, which, I definitely think of Adam Schiff as being a candidate for that seat for appointment.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Or even beyond that, I also see him being appointed into the Biden cabinet. There's a lot of talk of him being appointed Attorney General. So if that were to happen, that would leave a vacancy in the House seat, and there would be a special election for that, which would probably take place, my guess would be probably in spring or summer of 2021. So it could be, we could be running for that as soon as next summer, or, possibly just wait until the 2020.
And would you consider, running as a People's Party candidate or a third party?
Absolutely. I think this is kind of one of those moments where everyone's just kind of like waiting to see what happens. We've gotten a lot of great support so far, and I'm curious to see what some of the progressives who are already in office, how they either respond or don't respond to this. So, I'm particularly interested to see what, the members of the squad, if they come out and endorse the People's Party, or what they have to say about it. Because I do think that the progressive faction of Congress right now, I think that there needs to be an alliance between the People's Party and the progressives as they are. Otherwise, you know what I mean? So yes, I would consider running under the People's Party. If I don't, I'll run as a progressive Democrat who supports the People's Party, and possibly wait until the next election cycle. So I haven't really declared, which party I'm going to run under yet. I kind of want to wait and see how it goes. But, I'm hoping to run under the People's Party and hope that it gains enough traction, to make that, to do that. Otherwise,
it seems like in an area like LA that might be a good place to start out for them, where there is, like you mentioned, already a base of progressive activism, and people that are more open to these ideas, especially because they have seen the fact that Democratic policies in the establishment since haven't necessarily uplifted the poor and working class in this country, or in places like Los Angeles, where there is such a disparity between the richest and the poorest. And I think that maybe if they are going to get a footing, it would be in a place like LA. So obviously, whether you would decide to run as that or as a progressive Democrat, that would be amazing if you were able to get into office.
Totally. And I think it kind of I feel like this conversation kind of goes back to what we were just talking about with me running against Adam Schiff, and how, even though I didn't win, I was able to help push his policy to the left. And that's kind of what I view, at the very least, the benefit of the movement for the People's Party is that it's going to hold Democrats accountable. And, if even if we don't see it become a, fully viable third party, I do think that it will still be able to influence the policy of Democrats, and hopefully, push that policy to the left. And really go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we've talked about it on the show that we've really would like to see, if nothing more, and this was before the days of the People's Party gaining a lot of traction, but seeing a progressive caucus in a true form, unlike our current progressive caucus, but maybe like a corporate free caucus that takes the position of takes the alternate form of like a freedom caucus from back at the, early 2000s, when they were able to get into office and, really cause hell for their own party and get their demands across. And obviously they were pushing, anti-government Republican agendas. But if the squad and people with like-minded ideas could do the same for the Democratic Party and demand that we get, a universal healthcare system in this country, and demand that we get, tuition-free college, et cetera, I think that we would see a lot more progress.
Totally. And that's the thing. And I think that's really the ultimate goal of it all. we wouldn't be having the need to form this new party if our demands were being met. So if the Democratic Party were to meet the progressive demands of Medicare for all, passing a Green New Deal, doing all of these things that we're demanding, again, there wouldn't even be a need to form this movement for a people's party, but that's not happening. But if that were to happen, due to pressure from a people's party, then it ultimately achieves the same goal.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
totally. I mean, even like hardcore leftists, even people like myself that currently I'm not planning on voting for Joe Biden, but I would happily do it if he gave me a reason to, right? Like if there's one policy on the board that he was offering, I would do it. Legalize cannabis, Medicare for all. Any one of the, even $15 an hour minimum wage, something that he would just actually embrace and run on in a serious way and actually promise it in a way that I believe, I'd vote for him. I think a lot of people would too. I think a lot of people that aren't even into politics would, because it would be at least a tangible improvement to their life. And I think that's so emblematic of the Democrats as a whole. They really don't have to go that far left to get, the votes of the youth or the progressive left flank. It's really just that they're so, they're so eager to spit in our eye that they won't even give us the very bare minimum.
Exactly. They're doing everything they can just to make sure the status quo stays the status quo. You're right. I mean, it's so interesting because, it's disgusting, really, the way that they spew these hopeful messages and they speak in these, with these grandiose fantasies of what, life can be like. And yet, it really can't be like that unless we have these policies that we're asking for.
Yeah.
We're asking for tangible policies, not abstract, hopeful messages. And, I think people are really wising up to that. I think people are really wising up to that.
I think a lot of that's the internet. I think that people finally can see with their own eyes somebody who's saying, oh, no, we can have that. Look at these people that have that. Look at this study that says that this is going to save the country money. Look at how they just cut a check for the Wall Street, where they could cut a check for universal health care. And I think it's important that people such as yourself are running on these ideas and doing the work of pushing the party to the left and bringing the ideas to the fold and introducing them to the members of your community when they haven't been, and really taking this charge and doing the work when it's hard. So we just appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's tough work, and it's interesting being up against a lot of people who don't share your ideas, but it really just baffles me that people wouldn't share ideas of, wanting to help everybody, of wanting to have, equal resources for people, wanting to have access to healthcare, education, housing. It just baffles me that, everyone isn't on the same page. And, I hope that that's one of the things that I can do is help bring some people to that page,
Yeah,
totally. It baffles us too. And for people who want to, keep following you and keep, staying on top of what you're doing and when you run and, support you when you do, where can they find out more about you?
Thanks. You can visit my website, which is maebeagirlforcongress.org. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Maebe A Girl. That's MAEBEAGIRL. Or on Twitter, my handle is at Maebe _A_girl GIRL.
Right, and we'll put a link to your stuff in the
down below.
Yep.
Yeah, check it out, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe we really
absolutely. I really appreciate it. It was great chatting with you. I loved everything you had to say, and thanks for asking some great questions.
Of course. Thanks so much, and good luck. And we look forward to the future work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'd love to come back in 2021 after we announce our next campaign.
That would be great.
Absolutely, we look forward to having you.
Cool. All right, thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.